Well, there's a live look at Jags practice OTAs, or I think it's a live look. Maybe it's a delayed look at Jags practice OTA number 7 as special teams work begins. We're just talking about special teams and drills and everything else to get going on this Monday, final week of OTAs. Few more than mandatory minicamp. Take a look at Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, C.J. Beathard. Are they going to keep Beathard on this roster the entire way, or do you think at some point they let him go? What's your gut tell you there?
I think they keep him on the roster for a while because there's really, why not? You have 90 guys, correct? So having that one roster spot for an extra quarterback, maybe to kind of push Mac Jones a little more, make him feel a little pressure, I don't think it's a bad thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the roster for a majority of the preseason.
Well, Evan Ingram could play a little quarterback. There was a lot of talk about Ingram today and his leadership. A lot of talk about that guy today from Doug Peterson, saying Parker Washington looks really good. He could be an exciting player, man. Parker Washington delivered last year at times, but he also had some tough times. It'll be interesting, one, if he can get on the field, and two, if he can take another step, because people are excited when he got drafted. I know he's a 6th-round pick, but they were really excited about him coming out of Penn State. Thought it was a steal.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, you have Brian Thomas Jr., you have Gabe Davis, you have Christian Kirk right now, and you're starting 3. But, if something were to happen, if we need, someone to get a little quick spell, I think that's the next guy that's going to come in. And, hopefully he can take a step forward from what he showed last year.
You're looking at Andre Cisco and Tyson Campbell there. Cisco, by the way, was the first one to volunteer to be that kickoff guy, according to Heath Farwell. Cisco's a fun guy. I really like him. I think he's having a nice career. I think it'll be interesting to see if he can become like a star in the league. We haven't seen that yet, but I think he's shown some moments of it as Heath Farwell, kind of the man of the hours. We talk a lot of Jags special teams. He did say this about Antonio Johnson today. He said, unfortunately, I'm not going to see much of Antonio Johnson. I got a feeling he's going to be playing too much defense probably to be playing special teams. Yeah. That's maybe a little bit of a showcase on the upside, the inner talkings of that building on how they feel about the second-year player out of Texas A&M.
No, he could be definitely competing for some starting time. It's definitely a very deep and I think, for the most part, experienced secondary. I was saying Antonio Johnson's more of the younger side, but that's going to be like the true battle. I think we talk about training camp of what kind of battles do you actually have. Like, I think offensive line's pretty much shored up. Does Walker Little kind of fit in somewhere? We'll see. Obviously, wide receivers are kind of shored up. On the defensive line, I think everything's kind of shored up. But the secondary is really the position where we don't really know right now. And every time you're going to have at least one position in training camp that's going to have that, and this year it's a secondary.
Hey, why are people so high? Antonio Johnson's been a guy that they thought slipped, right? So I get this sometimes. People will be like, hey, yeah, he's a 5th-round pick, but he really wasn't a 5th-round pick. He just slipped. It's like, okay, well, he slipped. I don't know what that means. We say guys are overdrafted. We say he slipped. The bottom line is you pass up on him by 30 teams. If you thought he was a 3rd-round pick, teams passed up on him like twice. So he's a 5th-round pick out of Texas A&M, and I know people loved it at the time, much like Parker Washington. They thought those were steals, and we don't know that yet. We really don't know what those guys were going to do in a Jags uniform at their career. They've shown a couple of flashes, and then we'll see. But there is some excitement about Antonio Johnson. He seems a very mature player. He kind of fits their profile of what they're getting as a player. He could be a big hitter in the college days, even though he's a very athletic guy. He doesn't strike. Like some guys come in, man, they're fit. Like Tank Bigsby looks like a dude. Right? Antonio Johnson's not like physically imposing, but he's not afraid to hit. He's a willing guy. He can play nickel. He can run. He can play that safety spot. Looks like they're going to put him in the safety spot. I just try to figure out sometimes why the fans get so excited, but then when the coaches back it up a little bit, and we did see some of the flashes, it kind of says, hey, we might be onto something here in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think if you're a secondary player, you can set yourself apart 2 ways. Number one, obviously, if you're like a lockdown corner, or a safety who gets a lot of interceptions or a lot of big plays, obviously people know you that way. Another way is if you kind of have that dog in you a little bit, you play with a lot of intensity and you're not afraid to hit somebody, because a lot of the times in cornerback positions, we see guys want to make quote-unquote business decisions. If you have Derrick Henry running at you, sometimes if you're a cornerback, you will make a business decision. I don't think Antonio Johnson's built like that. I think Antonio Johnson has a dog in him. I think Antonio Johnson embraces the contact, and from the cornerback position, from the nickel, whatever you want to put him, sometimes that's kind of a rare thing. So when you have a guy who's not afraid to hit people, yeah, you want to see him on the field because that can resonate with the rest of your team on defense.
All right, so we just hit a bunch of different topics here as Stuart gave us a look out at OTAs, OTA number 7. We'll probably get back out there. They might some of the periods are closed, so we might not have some of the video, but bounce in and out of there as Stewart's there. Trevor Lawrence talks today. I am, just to piggyback, I know we're bouncing around because we're getting a bunch of different shots, but to go back to the 3 quarterback thing, I think the Jags have built a pretty nice room. Like, Beathard came in and won a game. Beathard came in when a couple of times last year, and I thought he did really well. He put them in a position to beat Cincinnati. Like, there's a lot to like about Beathard, and obviously Trevor likes Beathard, and they have a really good relationship. I think it's Beathard that calls Trevor his best friend on the team, and I mean, they're like 5-6 years age difference there, but you can tell that relationship matters. That comfort matters. There's a reason why Matt Schaub was like a backup quarterback, and we thought he was out of the league for 5 years, and he was still on a roster. You know, like, that relationship stuff matters, especially to a young quarterback. The Mac Jones situation coming in, I think, gives you a better option than Beathard, so I like what the Jags did there. I think Mac is the perfect attitude right now. I mean, you can tell he's so happy to be here and out of New England. And so right now that room is in a really good place, I think. When everybody wondered, what's this mean about Mac Jones coming in? I think there's nothing there to say, he's going to push, he's going to do this, it's going to be a tough room. No way. I think this room is really good right now in Jacksonville. I think the big question is when they get to September, do they want 3 guys? Do they keep Beathard around at the price tag that he has? Yeah,
I think Mac Jones indeed has found a new lease on life, and can he parlay that to, once again, like, if he's on the field, well, that's not good, because then hopefully something, didn't happen to Trevor, but the only way he's going to get on the field is if that happens, because Trevor Lawrence is your starting quarterback. So in a backup role, though, if Mac Jones was to come in, you feel pretty good about at least managing the game and not, turn the game over. You know how I feel about Beathard, though. I want to see him on this team because, once again, I think the main role of a backup quarterback is to help your starter out in terms of bouncing questions, to kind of oversee everything, and CJ Beathard has a lot of experience. Mac Jones, not so much. So I would feel a lot more comfortable because Trevor Lawrence is nowhere near the finished product yet. There's still room for growth. There's still room to improve his skill set. So if that's what we're talking about, well, then I want that quarterback who's improving his skill set to have a guy to bounce stuff off of, to have a guy who's been there, who's been experienced, who's been around the league for a while. I think C.J. Beathard is that guy. Mac Jones, not so much.
Well, and I think there's one thing about, like, Beathard can't relate in this instance, and Beathard's been around a lot of quarterbacks, so experience-wise, that's great. But Beathard can't relate to what Mac and Trevor can. Mac and Trevor come in at the same year. They both have some good moments, but they've also had some rough moments. I mean, look at Mac Jones, man. It's really not talked about anymore. He had to try to follow Tom Brady in New England. I mean, that never works. Like, people don't take jobs because they don't want to follow a legend. Mac had no choice in New England, and they can at least complain about some things in the room is what I'm talking about. They can draw on each other's experience. They have some common ground. Okay. Both obviously know in Jacksonville, both being younger players, the different college experience, which was high level, to the NFL of, hey, man, we're still trying to figure this out. Again, this is more quarterback room stuff than on the field, but I think I don't think it's a bad thing to have for Trevor, older guy, and also a guy that can relate a little bit in the room right now.
No, I mean, I don't think that's bad at all, but I think it's going to be bad if you get rid of that older guy, then all you have is 2 guys the same age that have essentially played in the NFL for the same amount of time, which is not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Then I think I get a little worried. So that's going to be the big question, is if you keep C.J. Beathard around, once again, just to kind of help grow Trevor Lawrence, or are you confident with Trevor Lawrence's abilities right now? Are you confident where he's at, and he can take, the reins from here, hand over the car keys, and say, C.J. Beathard, we'll see you later? I mean, it's not going to be talked about a lot in terms of if Beathard was to stay or leave, but I think it's going to be a big thing in terms of Trevor Lawrence's development.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying there, and I always ask this question, wonder this question with the young quarterbacks, right? Like, Henny was with Mahomes for a bit, and now they bring in Gabbert, who's still an older guy. So there's that way. Or when do you get to the point where Trevor's going to sign a huge deal, and he's going to be 4 years in, like after this year, and Mac's going to go try to find another job, and Beathard's done, and you can be like, hey, we'll just go bring the young quarterback in, just have the young quarterback, because now Trevor's owns the room. I mean, he already does own the room, but he really owns the room. He owns the offense. It's his offense. It's his franchise. It's his team. We're comfortable. I don't know how long that was until they brought the what was it, like Mallet and other guys like Jimmy G and around Brady. I don't know what the time frame is, but at some point you'll get to that stage, hopefully with Trevor Lawrence, where you're just like, hey, we're just going to take a 5th-round quarterback, 6th-round quarterback, have a guy that you can groom.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's simple. You reach that status when you've arrived and, there's no really room to improve as a quarterback. That's when it's all right. I mean, there's not much more like growth that can happen. Like Patrick Mahomes, like, yeah, he's a great quarterback. Can he really grow and be that much better? I mean, I don't think so. Like, yeah. What would that look like? So I just think you get to a point as a quarterback where you get comfortable and confident, and it's like, okay, this is who we have. I think with Trevor Lawrence, like, we've seen potential, but yeah, well, he's not fully established yet as the quarterback that we expect him to be. There's still room for growth. So if that's still the conversation, which has to be in that building,
of course, yeah,
then I think you keep CJ Beathard around. When it's time to say, all right, Trevor's there now. He's finally arrived. This is who we thought he was. There's really no room for growth. Just turn him loose. Let him have fun. Then CJ Beathard, we don't need you anymore.
Yeah, I'm bouncing around here, but let's go back to a guy that we showed earlier. That was Andre Cisco. And where are you on Cisco? I think he's been a steady player for them.
Yeah.
What I like about Cisco is that he gets the football. I think he had 4 last year. Maybe it was just 3. Started off hot, I think it was. Then missed a couple games. But his MO coming out of Syracuse was he was a ball-hawking guy. Mm-hmm. He's been that. He's added weight. I think he understands it well. He made some mistakes as a young player in his rookie year, but I think he's done a nice job. But I wonder, can he get to like the star level? Can be like a top 6, top 5 kind of guy in the NFL at that position? I don't even know where you'd rank him right now. Free safety is an interesting spot. Not easy to find sometimes, at least elite guys. But he's kind of got a little Tyson Campbell in him, where it's like, I can see stardom, but it's like, are they going to get there?
Yeah, I mean, top 5. I'm not sure about top 5, but if he just keeps improving, if he keeps doing his thing, and once again, I love the mentality that he brings to the team. Now, like last year, yeah, the defense struggled a little bit towards the end of the year. I think that was on everybody, not just one singular person. But if he can kind of act upon the good things that he's shown lately, and once again, having that mindset, that dog in him, yeah, I think that there's room for him to be a star in this league.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of that often, and you know this better than me, comes to how great do they want to be, right? I mean, how focused, locked in. I mean, we saw with Josh Allen last year. Obviously, there was motivation. Well, there's motivation this year for Cisco. There's motivation for Tyson. Mm-hmm. These guys are coming toward the end of their career. I mean, the money is coming up this year for those guys. So you're going to see the best edition of those guys, I would think.
Absolutely. Yeah, and once again, with a new defense with Ryan Nielsen, who, okay, with the whole Ryan Nielsen thing, is it secondary first or pass rush first?
Yeah,
we always go back and forth with that. I think he does put a premium in terms of the secondary and in terms of what they can do. But also, I feel like when you have Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, it's going to make your job as a safety, as a cornerback, that much easier. So I think this could be a year where if they throw some different kind of looks, if they blitz a little more, could Cisco kind of be used in different ways? Well, then you might have something there.
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I think Tyson Campbell is such a big piece to that secondary because there's some unknowns. There's depth. We talked about it. We're doing this last night on the show again. We're just kind of bringing up, hey, the Jags, kind of like our storyline last week, is there a little bit of false hope because the Jags have a lot that you can fall in love with or like or see, but what could happen? Well, part of that but is the secondary. I mean, we don't know exactly what they have. We think we like what they potentially could have. Even the nickel spot is like, is Darnell Savage going to be that guy? Antonio Johnson could play that role. They just drafted Jerry Jones. I mean, they got guys that can play multiple spots that you're not sure who's even going to win the spot yet, which I think can be good, but I also don't know if I love that because then I know I've got a proven guy there. We do know Tyson Campbell is going to be one of the corners, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's why I think Tyson is very key here. If you look around that secondary, what I do is I look for potential blue chippers. Well, we just talked about Cisco. Maybe he gets there. But Campbell's the guy that can get there. He's been closest to flirting with that. We've seen enough of him to be able to buy into that. Had a lost year last year with the injuries. Can he get back to form in a prove-it year with a contract in the wings? I mean, to me, is like the whole key, because that will make Darby better. That will make whatever you have of a mix of Antonio Johnson and Darnell Savage and Jerrion Jones better. And now I feel really good about your depth, especially if you got a guy that you can stick on, hopefully Tyreek Hill or Waddle, whatever side of the field they are on in week one. You're playing some big-time receivers, including the guy that got paid today in Justin Jefferson.
No, I think that, listen, the draft this past, the most recent draft has showed that I think the Jaguars believe in Tyson Campbell, or else they would have addressed, the cornerback position in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah.
So I think they believe in him, and I think it's the right call to believe in him. I get last year was rough, playing with some injuries, wasn't 100%. Okay, let's see what he's got this year. But he has shown glimpses of brilliance, and he has shown glimpses of excellence. And I think if he can revert back to that, then yeah, it's going to make everyone's job a lot easier. Now, are you going to just play him on a side? Do you have him, follow the one receiver? I mean, we'll see how Nielsen approaches that whole thing. Maybe there's just a certain side that Tyson Campbell wants to play on, because some teams do this. This is more zone coverage teams where it's like, all right, Richard Sherman, play on the right side. He doesn't. Yeah. But for the most part, though, I think Nielsen's going to put these guys in the best position to succeed. And I think in doing so, Tyson Campbell could have a great year. And then the conversation is going to be, well, do you give him a new contract or not? I want to have the conversation. I want to have the conversation of, man, how are the Jaguars going to pay Tyson Campbell now? That's the conversation I want to have after the season.
Yeah, it would be a huge conversation to be able to have if they were able to do that. And, I think they need to have that conversation. He needs to be good. Again, look at the list of receivers the Jags play. Waddle and Hill, Collins and Dell. And by the way, Stephon Diggs in Houston. It's not just him. He can't guard everybody. I don't think he's a traveling corner. They haven't used him that way, at least in the past. We'll see what Nielsen does. But, the list goes on and on of, even just him against Calvin Ridley. That was fun in practice. Now it's going to be a real deal thing against the Tennessee Titans. So everybody's getting good and better. And heck, they played Devontae Adams and the Raiders later in the year, too. So receivers all over the place.
And the beauty, what I love, too, about having this competition, it's going to seem like in the secondary, is that you're going to find out really quick who's going to be the starter and who's not going to be the starter. When you have competition at offensive line or even, more importantly, defensive line and, edge rush. Say you had competition there. It's a lot that can happen. Sometimes you get lucky, you get a quarterback second. I got a second preseason, so he's the starter now. Sometimes things can just fall in your lap. In the secondary, it's different, where if you're on an island, if it's one-on-one, you're going to know if you can hang or not. So, once again, injuries are things. Hopefully, everyone can stay healthy. But if everyone's healthy and this competition shakes out, you're going to know, because, you'll see it in preseason. You'll see it in practice. You'll see it when the Bucs come to town and it's one-on-one. Who's going to Mike Evans? How do you do against him? How do you do against Chris Godwin? You're going to find out who the best cover guys are pretty quickly.
Yeah, we will find out for sure when it comes to that. And it's going to be a fascinating watch, man. That defense coming together for the Jacksonville Jaguars is going to be pretty wild to see what unfolds, how they utilize it. Much like we were talking about earlier, even the kickoff. There's some fascinating questions around the team. Yet I think we go back to the offense and we feel like we kind of know what to expect. I don't think we know what to expect on the defensive side of the ball for the Jags. I think we know what to expect on the offensive side of the ball for the Jags this year. We think we're going to get a little bit more of the dual back stuff. You threw out there, and maybe we get some fullback stuff. We think we're going to go down the field a little bit more here in Jacksonville because of the additions of Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr., and then you know what you're getting out of Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. And by the way, Ingram once again lauded by Doug Peterson today about what he's done, kind of stepping up in a leadership role. When you've performed the way he's performed, it's almost like the evolution of him being here in Jacksonville, right? He's got to kind of take on more ownership. It comes naturally for a quarterback like Trevor Lawrence, but you almost sense that Ingram wants to do that too, along with the guys like Kirk who have now been around this thing for a few years.
Obviously, listen, when you're one of the best receiving targets, the best receiving threats on the team, that's going to come with a little more prestige. And I think Evan Ingram is definitely, was he captain last year?
That's a good question. I think he might have been. I don't know.
Okay, I can't remember.
I don't know.
He definitely should be a captain going forward, just because I'm not sure what kind of vocal leader he is, or even a locker room leader he is, but I do know when he's on the field, he's one of the best guys that they have. So that should come with a C in its own right. But no, I think you had a guy last year who set a precedent in terms of receptions and set a precedent in terms of being Trevor's go-to guy when Christian Kirk and Zay Jones were out. So yeah, I do expect him to take a step forward now and realize like, hey, this is your team too as well, Evan. Obviously, you guys set the example and everything, but knowing Doug Peterson, knowing how they love the tight end position, I expect Evan Ingram to get more love again this up-and-coming year.
A couple of comments in the chat let's get to in this first hour. And Glenn says, Justin Jefferson, very good, but not the top wide receiver in the game, in my opinion. And I don't think he goes on to say who he does think.
It's got to be Tyreek Hill.
I mean, it's either 1A or 1B, right?
Correct.
I thought Devontae Adams was in that for a bit. We're raving about Brent and Ayuk, but before that it was Deebo Samuel. So there have been some guys that have been in that mix. Like, who else could emerge to be like, hey, the crown is now mine? I mean, Jamar Chase might be another example of this.
Jamar Chase. Listen, I get Puka had a great season, but I just think it's kind of 1A, 1B in Los Angeles. So it's hard to have the best wide receiver when you have two great receivers. AJ Brown's up there. Just off the top of my head, I'm trying to think who else around the league. That's kind of what's sticking out to me right now.
There's so many good ones. See, that's the thing. It's like, what's the difference, right? What's the... heck, there are 3 top 10 guys picked this year that might battle for those spots if they continue on this trend of what Jefferson did and what Jamar Chase has done. And DK Metcalf has shown some flashes of that, but really hasn't been as consistently dominant like those guys.
I just think, and I assume, once again, that the comment was referring to Tyreek Hill being the best wide receiver in the league, and that very well could be the case. I just think Tyreek Hill and Jefferson are two different guys. Jefferson can kind of give you everything, gives you the route tree on 3rd and 5 or longer. He's going to be the go-to guy. Tyreek Hill has that big playability where it's like, hey, Tyreek, I'm going to throw you the ball, go get it, and then score a touchdown. I mean, we saw crazy numbers last year, crazy fantasy numbers, almost breaking a record in terms of Tyreek Hill, what he's capable of. So, I think it's 1A or 1B, depends what you're into, but I get the point of Tyreek Hill being that big receiver threat.
If you're watching my reaction on the stream at all, that was like...
some hawks or something?
Hawk chasing a couple of birds, I think it was, as it just swooped in. Thankfully, didn't hit anything. Or me. One other in the chat comment, ETN... had Alvin Kamara comps coming out. I think we've discussed this before, but we'll hit on it right now since you brought it up. Similar to New Orleans when they had Mark Ingram with Bigsby, and you've brought that up many times. I mean, that's kind of what you're hoping for. Is it, can you get the Ingram Kamara mold? Because the best Kamara was when Ingram was around, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly what you need. When you had the best offense, the best version of the Saints offense, it's when you had Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. And then it got to the point where it was like, all right, Ingram wanted more money. They're like, well, we have Alvin Kamara. He's great in 3rd downs. He can run between the tackles. Let's go give him the full workload. We'll let Mark Ingram go. Mark Ingram leaves. Alvin Kamara, for the first year, he was, just the bona fide workhorse, did pretty well. But then I think it kind of became too much. Injuries were a thing. And that's my fear now for Travis Etienne, where, he comes off a rookie year where he didn't play at all due to an injury, comes in a second year, kind of takes the league by storm a little bit, but you give this guy a constant workload because no one has really emerged as a good backup option for Travis Etienne. So he's had to kind of carry that workload a little bit. Do you have a guy in Tank Bigsby now who can come in, give him a little bit of a rest, and give him a different look? I think it's a great comparison. We've made it a couple times here on this show, and that's ideally what you want, is to take some of the workload off Travis Etienne and then pound the rock with Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, what I like about that, too, is the idea that Kamara's good even without Ingram anyway, right? He just made him better. Etienne's been good without Bigsby anyway, and really without anybody, kind of helping him out. Once he took the reins from James Robinson in year 2, I mean, it's been all Etienne, pretty much. They went to him. So can that make him even better? I think the bottom line is they're good already. They're impactful already. They deliver already. But is that one guy that makes you even better? And listen, we're not the only ones thinking about this. I mean, a guy like Doug Peterson knows that as well, and the other people on that staff know a little history lesson in recent history of the NFL and Saints and Kamara, and they've seen it too. And they probably have other comparisons that they could draw to and say, hey, we can use him like this. Doug was actually asked about that today. about more broad picture of what they've been working on and what he's trying to accomplish this time of year and what does it look like in the fall. And he mentioned like the kickoff rule as one, but he mentioned the red zone where he really focused in on the red zone. What I would have liked to have heard a little bit more, I don't think he would go here, is some of the stuff that we've talked about, because the Trevor soundbite from a couple of months ago now, the last time he talked, when he said, hey, it's going to look a little different. Like, we found something. We're changing some things. What does he mean by that? Now, I'm not sure Doug's going to get up in there and say that, but I don't think the red zone is really where it's going to all be different. I think it's going to look different because maybe conceptually they have some things. Schematically, they're going to do some different things. They're going to get Bigsby on the field a little bit more. They're going to go deep with Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis. Like, to me, those are the answers that my head comes up with of what it's going to look like. But I just thought it was interesting. Doug was asked about it. One of his first ways he went with that question was the red zone. So I don't know how much they can do differently in the red zone, but one of the things they can do differently is give Bigsby the ball a little bit more.
Yeah, without a doubt. And once again, I think if you can establish a physicality with your offensive line, your running game, that's only going to make you that much better. I mean, if you want to talk about identity and what this team has been the past couple of years, it's definitely been more, and I get it, like, not knocking Travis Etienne at all, because the guy can lower his shoulder, the guy can go between the tackles, but how much can he handle that? How many reps before it's like, okay, the guy's, kind of getting banged up here, let's get somebody else in for him. So I just think if you have a different look, the NFL these days, Brent, it's all about different looks. It's all about misdirection, confusion, and different looks. If you can go from a high, intense speed team with Travis Etienne and then bring in Tanks Bigsby and become more of like a power team and a physical team, it's only going to help you out.
Well, what a change that would be if all of a sudden in October we're talking about the Jags being a physical team. But the Buffalo Bills kind of changed their MO a little bit last year. They got to that run. Everybody was like, why aren't you running? Why aren't you running? Too much on Josh. Well, they were able to do that. And James Cook was able to deliver. I think the Jags might be better suited to deliver in that role than even the Buffalo Bills were at that time if the offensive line can get that push. That's probably the biggest mystery if they can do that.